The Indiana Fever enter the 2026 season as genuine title contenders. In Indianapolis, the sense of expectation is measurably different from prior years. The organization has moved past its rebuilding phase and is now structured around maximizing the prime years of Caitlin Clark. Clark remains the central figure. Her 2025 season was interrupted by injury in the late summer, but her standing in the league has not diminished. In current betting markets, she sits at plus 270 to win MVP, ahead of A'ja Wilson. That positioning reflects the broader expectation that Clark will not simply return to form, but perform at an elite level. The Fever spent the past 12 months building a roster capable of supporting that standard. The 2025 playoffs, despite ending without a title, provided meaningful returns. When Clark was ruled out in September, the team was widely expected to exit early. Instead, Indiana won a playoff series for the first time in a decade and pushed the Aces to 5 games in the semifinals. Players like Lexi Hull and Aaliyah Boston demonstrated that they could perform in high-stakes situations without their primary star. That experience is now part of the roster's foundation. General Manager Amber Cox and head coach Stephanie White prioritized continuity in the offseason. Clark, Hull, and Sophie Cunningham remained together. The most significant roster decision was the financial commitment to Kelsey Mitchell, a 1-year supermax contract at $1.4 million. Mitchell earned all WNBA first-team honors last season while carrying much of the offensive load. Paired with Clark in the backcourt, she represents a credible second scoring option capable of punishing defenses that overcommit to stopping Clark. The front office also addressed physical deficiencies exposed in losses to New York and Las Vegas. The additions of Shatori Walker-Kimbrough and Myisha Hines-Allen were direct responses to those shortcomings. Hines-Allen brings interior toughness, a rebounder, and screener whose value is in team defense and frontcourt physicality rather than individual scoring. Her role is to provide the interior structure required to remain competitive across a 5-game playoff series against the league's better frontcourts. On offense, Clark's contribution in 2026 extends beyond scoring. Her passing efficiency was one of the more underappreciated aspects of her rookie season. Under White's system, the expectation is a more deliberate half-court offense. With Mitchell and Cunningham spaced on the perimeter, opposing defenses face a consistent structural problem. Helping off either guard creates open looks. Staying home allows Clark to operate freely at the top of the key. Boston's ability to finish at the rim adds a third dimension to that equation. The Fever also planned to manage Clark's minutes more carefully early in the season, partly to protect her lateral health ahead of the postseason. Walker-Kimbrough provides the ball handling required to run sets without Clark, allowing her to operate off screens, a look that was effective in limited use during her first season. Mitchell's contract extension was built around the durability of the Clark pairing. When Clark returned her attention to other defenders last season, Mitchell frequently had to generate offense under difficult conditions. With Clark drawing primary coverage and regular double teams in 2026, Mitchell's shot quality is expected to improve. The front office has assessed this combination as potentially the highest scoring backcourt in league history when both players are operating at their peak. Defensively, the 2025 semifinals revealed a specific vulnerability: interior rotation. Hines-Allen was brought in to address it. Alongside Boston, she gives Indiana a frontcourt capable of switching onto perimeter players when needed. Walker-Kimbrough adds pressure at the point of attack, reducing the defensive responsibilities placed on Clark. Hull and Cunningham have grown from supporting pieces into consistent contributors. Hull's development as a wing defender and catch-and-shoot scorer means she functions effectively without heavy usage. Cunningham provides physicality and shot-making in transition, assets that hold value regardless of the opponent. The bench carries more experience than in prior seasons. The 2025 playoff run produced players who have already performed under postseason conditions. That experience reduces the gap between Indiana's starting and reserve units. Indiana enters 2026 having addressed the primary weaknesses that limited them last year: depth, interior defense, and backcourt redundancy. Mitchell's retention, the veteran additions, and Clark's projected return to full health have produced a roster without obvious structural flaws. The odds makers have responded accordingly. The franchise is no longer positioned as a developing program. It is positioned to compete for a championship. The draft added a dimension the front office had been quietly prioritizing since last season's exit: backcourt depth. The injuries that ended Clark's 2025 season early, an ankle issue followed by a groin strain that limited her to 13 games, and the rhabdomyolysis that cut into Kelsey Mitchell's availability exposed a structural fragility. Indiana had talent at the top of their guard rotation, but almost nothing behind it. The 2026 draft was a direct response to that vulnerability. With the 10th overall pick, the Fever selected Raven Johnson out of South Carolina. Over 5 seasons with the Gamecocks, Johnson lost just 11 games. She won 2 national championships under Dawn Staley and closed her college career averaging 9.9 points and 5.1 assists in her final season. Her value, however, is not built on scoring volume. She is a defensive specialist, long, strong, and physically capable of guarding multiple positions. Coach Stephanie White specifically cited her versatility as the reason for the selection. The pick carries a secondary narrative that the organization will have to manage. Johnson and Clark share history from their college years, most notably a 2023 Final Four game in which Clark dribbled past Johnson's position and waved off her own teammate, leaving Johnson unguarded near the three-point line. The moment circulated widely online. When Indiana selected Johnson, it resurfaced immediately. Johnson addressed the attention directly, noting the impact the moment had on her publicly, while Clark made clear that neither player intends to let it define the dynamic in the locker room. Aaliyah Boston, who played alongside Johnson at South Carolina, offered a measured assessment of the pairing, describing any tension around the subject as beside the point. The Fever have too serious a season ahead to allow a college anecdote to consume bandwidth. In practical terms, Johnson's role in 2026 will be limited and well-defined. She enters behind Tyasha Harris in the depth chart for backup point guard duties. Harris, a 9-year professional who grew up in Fishers, Indiana and played at Heritage Christian, brings the kind of professional composure that a rookie needs to watch and absorb in real time. White described the arrangement as purposeful, Johnson learning from Harris while contributing in stretches where her defensive energy is the primary asset. The floor spacing around Clark and Mitchell means that Indiana can afford a backup guard who contributes more on defense than offense, provided she does not disrupt the offensive flow when she's on the court. The front court, meanwhile, received perhaps the most significant structural upgrade of any roster layer. Monique Billings arrived on a 2-year deal worth $800,000 annually, making her Indiana's second highest paid player for the 2026 season. Billings spent the previous season with the Golden State Valkyries, where she posted a career-best defensive rating of 95.52 on a team that led the league in scoring defense. She converts over 80% of her shots within 3 feet of the basket, and proved she could function effectively in a system built around ball movement and interior passing. General Manager Amber Cox was direct about the rationale. Billings fits the way Indiana wants to play. She does not need the ball to make an impact, and she does not require a defined offensive role to stay engaged defensively. Paired alongside Aaliyah Boston, Billings gives the Fever a front court that can cover multiple defensive assignments without breaking structure. Boston earned all WNBA second-team honors in 2025 and remains the primary post target in Clark's passing game. What Billings adds is front-court redundancy, a second capable defender in the paint who can absorb minutes when Boston needs rest without the defensive drop-off that previously forced Indiana into smaller, more vulnerable lineups. The draft also produced Justine Pissett out of Vanderbilt, selected 25th overall, and Jessica Timmons from Alabama at pick 40. Pissett finished her final college season averaging 11.1 points, 4.5 rebounds, and 2.3 assists across 34 starts. At Vanderbilt, she developed as a perimeter-capable forward with enough interior awareness to contribute on the glass. Timmons, a 5'8" guard, averaged 16.3 points and shot close to 40% from 3 in her final year at Alabama. Both players face genuine roster competition heading into training camp. The Fever's current depth chart has limited space for developmental prospects unless they demonstrate immediate utility in White's system. Training camp opens April 19 with 15 players in the building, including 2 additional invitees on standard camp deals, Kiana Taylor and Megan McConnell. The roster will need to be reduced to 12 players, with 2 additional developmental spots available. The decisions made over the following weeks will tell a great deal about how the coaching staff weighs current championship readiness against longer-term roster construction. What makes this particular training camp different from those of recent years is that the margin for organizational patience has essentially closed. Every player who makes the final roster will be expected to contribute to a playoff run. Stephanie White has built a reputation for precise rotational discipline, and the 2026 roster, even at full strength, does not contain passengers. Every signing and draft selection was made with a defined function in mind. That level of organizational clarity is relatively rare, and it reduces the risk of the roster confusion that derailed Indiana in portions of their earlier rebuilding seasons. The competitive landscape surrounding Indiana has also shifted in ways that will test their championship ambitions. The Las Vegas Aces remain the defending champions after eliminating the Fever in 5 games last year, the deciding game ending 107-98 in overtime. The Minnesota Lynx enter the season as the current betting favorites. The New York Liberty, who have consistently posed physical problems for Indiana in recent years, remain a legitimate Eastern contender. In the current market, Indiana sits 4th in championship odds, a position that reflects both the genuine quality of their roster and the residual uncertainty around Clark's ability to return to full health and play a complete season for the first time since her rookie year. That health question is, in the end, the organizing principle around which everything else in the 2026 season will be evaluated. The roster is constructed, the continuity is real, the experience is there. But Indiana went 24-20 last season without Clark for most of the year, which is a testament to the organization's depth and Mitchell's individual performance. The version of this team that takes the court with Clark healthy and active for a full season has not yet existed. Her rookie campaign in 2024 was historic. Her second season was defined by injury. The 2026 season is the first genuine data point on what Indiana looks like when the player they built this franchise around is present, rested, and operating at her ceiling alongside a roster specifically assembled to maximize the window. The measure of this offseason will ultimately not be determined by any individual signing or draft selection. It will be determined by whether the decisions made in April of 2026 hold up across 40 games of a regular season and then through the physical attrition of a playoff run. That is the standard Cox, White, and the ownership group have accepted. The infrastructure is in place. The questions remaining are competitive rather than organizational, and that for a franchise that spent the better part of a decade with the opposite problem represents genuine and measurable progress. Before any of the roster decisions could be finalized, the Fever and every other franchise in the league were operating under conditions created by a labor situation that had been unresolved for months. The WNBA's collective bargaining agreement expired in January of 2026, and the Players Association had opted out of the previous deal in October of 2025. What followed was a compressed and uncertain offseason in which teams could not fully plan, sign players, or draft in the normal sequence. The league and the union did not reach a tentative agreement until March 20 after marathon bargaining sessions that stretched up to 16 hours in a single day. Both sides ratified the new 7-year deal unanimously. The practical effect on Indiana was significant. The Fever entered free agency, which was pushed to early April instead of its usual late January window, with only 3 players under contract: Clark, Aaliyah Boston, and Michaela Timpson. Every other roster decision had to be executed in a matter of days rather than months. Cox and White compressed what is normally a deliberate phased process into a single chaotic week. That they came out of it with a coherent and purpose-built roster is in itself a measure of organizational competence. The new CBA also altered the financial architecture within which Indiana made those decisions. The team salary cap rose to $7 million for the 2026 season, a dramatic increase from the $1.5 million cap that governed the prior agreement. That shift created both opportunity and complexity. Indiana's commitment to Mitchell at $1.4 million, the supermax under the new scale, now sits inside a cap environment where such a contract is meaningful but not prohibitive. The Billings deal at $800,000 annually represents Indiana's second-largest salary commitment. Clark, entering the 3rd year of her rookie contract under the adjusted new CBA parameters, is projected to earn approximately $530,000 in 2026. Boston, entering her 4th year on a rookie deal and eligible for renegotiation under the new EPIC provision, created specifically for all WNBA players on initial contracts, will have her salary reconfigured as well. The Fever's core financial commitments are, under the new cap ceiling, structurally manageable. One provision of the new CBA carries particular relevance for the Fever, given recent history. The agreement created a pregnancy and childbirth salary cap exception, and a new developmental roster structure of 2 additional spots per team that do not count against the cap. For a franchise that absorbed 6 season-ending injuries in 2025 alone, the developmental spots represent genuine insurance rather than theoretical protection. If Clark or Mitchell miss time again in 2026, Indiana can activate a developmental player without the salary and roster constraints that previously required hardship contracts and roster manipulation decisions made under duress. The league's 30th season also introduces a structural change to the competitive landscape that Indiana will need to navigate. 2 expansion franchises, the Portland Fire and the Toronto Tempo, began operations in 2026 following an expansion draft on April 6. Both teams drew players from existing rosters across the league. Indiana lost 2 players to the expansion process, which narrowed their pre-free agency options and accelerated the need for external additions. The expansion also extends the regular season schedule, with all 15 teams now competing in a 44-game slate that runs deeper into the fall due to the FIBA Women's Basketball World Cup break scheduled from August 31 through September 16. Indiana's regular season closes on the road against the Minnesota Lynx on September 24. The schedule itself presents its own set of challenges. Indiana opens the regular season on May 9 at home against the Dallas Wings, a matchup framed around the concentration of recent first overall draft picks on the floor simultaneously. Boston, Clark, Paige Buchers, and the Wings' 2026 top selection are all expected to be in the building for that game. It will mark Clark's first competitive action since her groin injury cut short her second season, and that fact alone will draw significant attention. The Fever's first road trip after that opener will test how quickly White can integrate new roster pieces into a coherent system under live game conditions. The Commissioner's Cup group stage, running from June 1 through June 17, adds a layer of competitive significance to an already demanding early schedule. Indiana won the Cup in 2025, defeating the Minnesota Lynx in the championship game, and enters 2026 as defending champions. Their Cup group includes matchups against Atlanta, New York, Washington, Chicago, Connecticut, and Toronto. One more Cup game than they played in the previous year. Every result counts toward the regular season standings, which means the Cup schedule is not a secondary concern but an integrated part of Indiana's overall record. The New York Liberty remain the most physically taxing opponent in the Eastern Conference for the Fever. New York has repeatedly presented Indiana with defensive schemes that compress the paint, extend possessions, and limit transition opportunities, the areas where Clark generates her most efficient looks. The Liberty's perimeter size and defensive versatility creates problems that the Clark-Mitchell backcourt has not yet solved over a full series. The additions of Hines Allen and Billings in the frontcourt represent, in part, a recognition that Indiana needs more interior mass to withstand what New York can put on the floor. The only regular season visit from the defending champion Las Vegas Aces to Gainbridge Fieldhouse is scheduled for August, which by that point in the season will function as a genuine postseason preview. The league's title odds entering 2026 place Indiana 4th, behind Minnesota, Las Vegas, and New York. That positioning reflects both the respect the market has for Indiana's roster construction and the residual uncertainty around 2 consecutive injury-affected seasons from their central player. The Lynx, having reached the semifinals in 2025 before falling to the Aces, are considered the most complete roster in the league at full strength. Minnesota's combination of depth, defensive organization, and veteran composure gives them a profile that performs consistently across a long season. Las Vegas, as the defending champion, carries the structural advantages of a roster that has already won under pressure and does not need to discover whether it can perform when it matters. Indiana's path through the bracket, if they advance as expected, will likely run through at least one of those 3 franchises before a finals appearance becomes possible. The semifinals format remains best of 5, and the finals expands to best of 7. The Fever's experience in a 5-game series last year, pushing the Aces to overtime in the deciding game, means they understand that depth, rotation management, and defensive adjustability across multiple games are the variables that separate contenders from champions. A 7-game series adds further demands on those same variables. What the 2026 Indiana Fever ultimately represent is a franchise that has used every available tool, the draft, free agency, veteran signings, and the expanded salary cap created by a new labor agreement, to construct a roster without a clear structural weakness for the first time in the Clark era. The injury history introduces caution, and the competition introduces difficulty, but the organizational intent is unambiguous. This is a team built for a specific outcome, operating within a specific window, with the full knowledge of what it will cost if that window closes without a title. The 2025 run, impressive as it was given the circumstances, served its purpose as confirmation that the supporting cast is real. The 2026 season is the examination that matters,